Don't be afraid to say no. And when it comes to saying no, sometimes those of us who have a hard time saying no, our biggest fear is, what if they come back and say, well, why not? Well, here's what you can say. It doesn't work for me. Hey, that doesn't work for me. That tone doesn't work for me. That schedule doesn't work for me. Your attitude, it just doesn't work for us. It works to establish what works and what doesn't work. And so, hey, no, it doesn't work for me. So don't be afraid to say no. And so if someone comes to us and it's a strained relationship where they say, hey, I need you to take care of this for me, although it should be their responsibility, what we do is we set up a boundary to hand that weight back to them, saying, hey, it's on you to go get a job and to pay for your bills. It's on you to manage your own happiness. It's on you to take the steps to go ahead and get sober. This is your weight. This is your responsibility. It's on you to carry, not on me. And so when it comes to what's going on in the strained relationship, the first question we need to ask ourselves, hey, is this a boulder season or is this a backpack? And if it's a boulder, we step in and we help for the time being. But if it's a backpack, here's what we do. We set up a boundary and we let them deal with this because it's their responsibility to carry and they grow when they carry it. And so we set a boundary up with them. Now, the challenge with a boundary is we're like, ooh, that feels a little mean. That feels a little restricting at first, and it feels like it's going to be hard. But here's the great thing about a boundary. A boundary actually provides clarity for them, and it leads to freedom. Because boundaries, they establish, when you establish boundaries, it brings freedom to you as well as to that other person. Because what we see time and time again, people actually crave boundaries. If we look at our kids, they just naturally crave boundaries. Studies are showing this over and over again, that when you give kids areas to play in and you clearly establish like the boundaries, like stay in this playground, here's what kids do all the time. They explore more. They play more. They find more freedom within those boundaries. And then their caregivers, the parents and the guardians who are watching them, they experience more freedom because they know exactly where to look and they know the boundaries that they set for those kids. Those boundaries, they establish freedom for you as well as for them. Now, where this gets really challenged for us is when it comes to establishing a boundary, the minute that we know we have to set up a boundary with another person is the minute that we realize we're going to have a tough conversation. Because just saying, hey, I'm going to put up a boundary and just ignore and avoid that person isn't setting up a boundary, it's avoiding that other person. We want to set up a boundary that can lead towards a healthier relationship with that other person, which means it can lead to a tough conversation that for a lot of us, we wonder, how am I going to be able to do that? Because we don't like confrontation. But Jesus actually gives us a teaching that is actually very helpful for us when it comes to doing this for their benefit as well as for our benefit. And here's what Jesus says when it comes to establishing these boundaries with other individuals. He says this to some of his followers. He says, if your brother sins against you, notice he uses the word brother. Jesus is saying this because he wants this to lead towards a healthier relationship. He says, if your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault. Show how this behavior is impacting you. And do this all over social media and all over the comments so the entire world has to see it. He doesn't say that. He says, do this just between the two of you. Because the goal is to lead towards a healthier relationship. So show him and set up this boundary between the two of you. And if he listens, you have won your brother over. Meaning, hey, this can pave the way towards a healthier relationship. And so when it comes to setting up this boundary with this other person, when we do this on purpose, there's a couple things that we want to keep in mind that can actually pave the way towards more health in this relationship. The first thing we want to keep in mind is that we want to start from a position of love. We want to do this for the betterment of the other person, not just for our betterment. A couple months ago, A coworker of mine did a really great job of doing this with me. She pulled me aside and she said, "Hey, Tyler, I really like working with you, and I want to work well together, and I think you want to work well with me together." I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And she just said, "Hey, just so you know, there's some things that you say to me and around others around me that makes me feel like you don't trust me that very much." And I'm like, "What, really? I didn't know that." And we started talking about it, and she started sharing with me just different ways that we can just show trust towards one another to lead towards a healthier working relationship. I mean, she just did a phenomenal job in just approaching it in this way. Where now we're working so much more effectively together because she started at that position of going for and having a better relationship. And so when it comes to starting this boundary, let's start from a position of love to have a healthier relationship with this other person. In fact, some of my best friendships have happened because it started with a significant conflict and we worked towards and figuring this out together for the betterment of the friendship and the relationship. So we start with a position of love. Second thing we want to keep in mind is don't be afraid to say no. And some of us, that word is a very hard word to say. We're like a salesman's dream. Right now that we're in spring and we know the insects are coming and apparently the cicadas, are going to come all over us and take over our yards. We know that the insect sellers are going down our streets on their hoverboards trying to get a subscription to spray their yards. And you may be the one that just has so much of a hard time saying no that you have 3 subscriptions to that. And it's not because you're scared of cicadas. You're scared of saying the word no to all of these salesmen. And so you're like, I got the triple spray 3 times. I don't know what's going on. Don't be afraid to say no. And when it comes to saying no, sometimes those of us who have a hard time saying no, our biggest fear is, what if they come back and say, well, why not? Well, here's what you can say. It doesn't work for me. And it just doesn't work for me. That tone doesn't work for me. That schedule doesn't work for me. Your attitude, it just doesn't work for us. It works to establish what works and what doesn't work. And so, hey, no, it doesn't work for me. So don't be afraid to say no. And then here's the third thing that we want to keep in mind, and this is probably going to be the most difficult for a lot of us, and that is we have to be ready to give consequences if necessary. Because sometimes in these strained relationships, they may not understand the words, they may not understand the boundaries. Here's what they're going to understand. They're going to understand consequences. And this isn't to punish them, this is to help them grow and to show, no, this is where the property line, where it ends. And so we give consequences that if you continue to talk to me in that tone, I'm going to end the conversation. Or if you show up drunk again, I'm going to have to go spend the night at my parents'. We give consequences if necessary. In fact, in their book, Boundaries, Dr. Henry Cloud and Townsend, they tell the story of this couple who have a 19-year-old daughter. And they're paying for their daughter to go to college. And while she's at college, she's ignoring her education and she's out partying every night. And her grades are tanking, and her parents are finding out about this, and so they start talking to her about this, and they explain, hey, here's the path that you're on. They're sharing stats with her. They're sharing, this is where you're going to end up at. She doesn't care. She just keeps partying. One time, she's home on break, and she's out late one night. She gets home really, really late. Her parents stay up, wait for her. They ask her where she's at. She lies about it, and the parents just finally say to her, they said, hey, this isn't working for us anymore. And because it's not working for us anymore, we're going to stop paying for college. And we're going to stop paying for your bills. And in fact, you have 2 hours to pack up all your things and to get out of here and to leave. And she started protesting at first. She's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that to me. And they're like, no, we can do that, and we're going to do that. And she finally grabbed her things and called a friend and went away. And her parents would say, that was the toughest night of their life, making a decision like that. But a few weeks later, she ended up knocking on their door and saying, hey, Mom, Dad, I've been sleeping on some friends' couches. And, I realized, this is a turning point for me. I want to turn this around. And is there a way that I can earn your trust again? And slowly but surely, they gave her some responsibilities back. She started working her way towards earning their trust. Finally, they realized, hey, we can maybe start sending her back to school. She goes back to school, graduates. Her parents were followers of Jesus, and they led her in a way where she made the decision to follow Jesus. And it just led to an incredible relationship between the parents and her. And I know not every story is going to end like that when we give consequences. But what we read in that story is that those parents and the daughter, they say, hey, that night of giving those consequences, that was a turning point for them. And their relationship wouldn't have hit that level if they wouldn't have taken that step to give that consequence, even though it was hard. And I know the pushback for a lot of us when it comes to the idea of boundaries is like, ooh, it doesn't feel very nice. And the reason why it doesn't feel very nice is it doesn't feel very nice to them. But when we put this in place and we do this on purpose from a position of love, it allows that other person to grow. Because it's so clear, it provides freedom, they can grow, and it paves the way towards healing in that relationship. Again, this is hard, but what pain are we going to choose? Are we going to choose to do this, or let that relationship continue to have that strain and be that full of tension and just be that tough? It's worth it to put a boundary up on purpose.